Chapter 17. The Dream. Aline commanded her footman to open the door. She then told André-Louis to get in beside her.
A moment, Aline.
He turned to his companion. Clymene was full of amazement. Harlequin and Columbine had just walked up to share her surprise. André-Louis spoke breathlessly.
Do you permit me, Clymene?
His words sounded more like a statement than a question.
Fortunately, you are not alone. Harlequin will take care of you. I will see you at dinner.
He sprang into the cabriolet without waiting for a reply. The footman closed the door. The coachman cracked his whip. The regal carriage rolled away along the quay. The three comedians stared after it in shock. Then Harlequin laughed.
Our Scaramouche is a prince in disguise,
he said. Columbine clapped her hands and smiled widely.
This is quite a romance for you, Clymene. How wonderful.
The frown melted from Clymene's brow. Her resentment changed to bewilderment.
But who is she? She is his sister.
Harlequin said confidently.
His sister? How do you know? I know what he will tell you when he returns. But why? Because you would not believe him if he said she was his mother.
They watched the carriage leave and then wandered in the same direction. Aline sat in the carriage and studied André-Louis with grave eyes. Her lips were slightly compressed. A tiny frown formed between her finely drawn eyebrows.
You have taken up with queer company, André.
Aline said first.
Perhaps I am mistaken in thinking your companion was Mademoiselle Binet of the Feydeau Theatre. You are not mistaken, but I had not imagined Mademoiselle Binet was already so famous. Oh, as to that...
Aline shrugged with a quiet scorn in her tone. She then explained.
I was simply at the play last night. I thought I recognized her. You were at the Feydeau last night? I never saw you. Were you there too? Was I there?
He cried. He then stopped and abruptly changed his tone.
Oh yes, I was there.
He said as casually as he could. He felt a sudden reluctance to admit that he had willingly stooped to a life she must consider unworthy. He felt grateful that his disguised face and voice had fooled even someone who knew him so well.
I understand,
Aline said. She compressed her lips a little more tightly.
What do you understand? I understand the rare attractions of Mademoiselle Binet. You would naturally be at the theater. Your tone conveyed that very clearly. Do you know you disappoint me, André? Perhaps this is stupid of me. I suppose it betrays my imperfect knowledge of men. I know that most young men of fashion find stage women irresistibly attractive. But I did not expect you to copy the ways of a fashionable man. I was foolish enough to imagine you were different. I thought you were above such trivial pursuits. I considered you something of an idealist. That is sheer flattery. I see that now, but you misled me. You talked so much about morality and philosophy that I was deceived. In fact, your hypocrisy was so perfect that I never suspected it. You have such a gift for acting. I wonder why you have not joined Mademoiselle Binet's troupe. I have joined them,
he said. It had become necessary to tell her the truth. This was the lesser of the two evils she presented. He saw incredulity, then consternation, and lastly disgust overspread her face.
Of course,
she said after a long pause.
That would bring you closer to your charmer. That was only one inducement. There was another reason. I found myself forced to choose between the stage and the gallows. I had the incredible weakness to prefer the stage. This choice was utterly unworthy of a man with my lofty ideals. But what can you expect? Like other idealists, I find it easier to preach than to practice. Shall I stop the carriage and remove my disgusting person? Or shall I tell you how it happened? Tell me how it happened first. Then we will decide.
He told her how he met the Binet troupe. He explained how the mounted police forced him to hide among the actors until the pursuit died down. This explanation dissolved her icy attitude.
My poor André, why did you not tell me this at first? You did not give me time. I also feared shocking you with the spectacle of my degradation.
She took him seriously.
But why was this needed? Why did you not send word of your location like I asked? I was only thinking of doing that yesterday. I hesitated for several reasons. Did you think we would be offended to know what you were doing? I preferred to surprise you by the magnitude of my ultimate achievements. Oh, are you going to become a great actor?
She was frankly scornful.
That is not impossible. But I am more concerned with becoming a great author. You have no reason to sneer. The calling is an honorable one. Everyone is proud to know men like Beaumarchais and Chenier. Do you hope to equal them? I hope to surpass them, but I acknowledge that they taught me how to write. What did you think of the play last night? It was amusing and well-conceived. Let me introduce you to the author. You? But the company performs improvisations. Even improvisers need an author to write their scenarios. That is all I write at present. Soon I will be writing modern plays. You deceive yourself, my poor André. The piece last night would have been nothing without the actors. You are fortunate to have your Scaramouche. I can introduce you to him in confidence. Are you Scaramouche? You?
She turned to look fully at him. He smiled his close-lipped smile that created deep wrinkles in his cheeks. He nodded.
And I did not recognize you. I thank you for the compliment. You naturally imagined I was a stagehand. Now you know everything about me. What about Gavrilac? How is my godfather?
Aline told him that Gavrilac was well. He was still profoundly indignant with André-Louis for running away, but he was also secretly worried about him.
I will write to him today and say I have seen you. Please do. Tell him I am well and prospering. But say no more than that. Do not tell him what I am doing. He has his prejudices too. Besides, it might not be wise. Now I must ask the question I have been burning to ask since I entered your carriage. Why are you in Nantes, Aline? I am visiting my aunt, Madame de Sautron. I went to the play with her yesterday. We have been bored at the chateau, but things will change now. My aunt is receiving several guests today. Monsieur de la Tour d'Azyr will be one of them.
André-Louis frowned and sighed.
Did you ever hear how poor Philippe de Vilmorin died? Yes. My uncle told me first. Then Monsieur de la Tour d'Azyr told me himself. Did that help you decide about this marriage? How could it? You forget I am only a woman. You do not expect me to judge between men in such matters, do you? Why not? You are well able to do so. You are especially capable since you have heard both sides. My godfather would tell you the truth. If you cannot judge, it means you do not want to judge.
His tone became harsh.
You willfully close your eyes to justice because it might block your unhealthy and unnatural ambition. Excellent.
She exclaimed. She studied him with amusement and something else.
Do you know you are almost funny? You rise unblushing from the dregs of life where I found you. You shake off the arm of that theater girl and then come to preach to me. I might still speak from the dregs of life to counsel you out of respect and devotion. Aline.
He was very stiff and stern.
But these are not the dregs of life. Honor and virtue are possible for a theater girl. But they are impossible for a lady who sells herself to satisfy her ambition. She barters herself in marriage for position, riches, and a great title.
She looked at him breathlessly. Anger turned her face pale. She reached for the carriage cord.
I think I had better let you out. Then you can go back and practice virtue and honor with your theater wench. You must not speak of her like that, Aline. Faith, now you get heated on her behalf. Do you think I am too delicate? Do you think I should speak of her as a... If you must speak of her at all...
He interrupted hotly.
You will speak of her as my wife.
Amazement smothered her anger. Her pallor deepened.
My God,
She said. She looked at him in horror. She presently asked him in horror.
are you married to that woman? Not yet, but I will be soon. Let me tell you something about this girl you treat with ignorant contempt. She is as good and pure as you are, Aline. She has wit and talent that have placed her where she is. These qualities will carry her much further. She also has the womanly sense to be guided by natural instincts when choosing a mate.
Aline trembled with passion. She pulled the cord.
You will get out this instant.
She told him fiercely.
How dare you compare me to that? To my future wife.
He interrupted before she could speak the infamous word. He opened the door himself without waiting for the footman. He leaped down to the street.
Give my compliments to the assassin you are going to marry,
he said furiously. He slammed the door.
Drive on,
he ordered the coachman. The carriage rolled away up the Faubourg Giguin. It left him standing in the street, quivering with rage. His anger gradually cooled as he walked back to the inn. He began to understand her point of view as he calmed down. He ultimately forgave her. It was not her fault she thought this way. Her upbringing had taught her to view every actress as a prostitute. Her background also conditioned her to calmly accept the monstrous arranged marriage she was offered. He returned to the inn and found the company at the table. A sudden silence fell when he entered. This silence suggested he was the subject of their conversation. Harlequin and Columbine had spread the story of this disguised prince. They told how a princess had snatched him up into her carriage and taken him away. The tale had only grown more dramatic in the telling. Clymene had been silent and thoughtful. She pondered what Columbine had called her romance. Her Scaramouche must clearly be far more important than he had appeared. A great lady would never have acted so familiar with him otherwise. Clymene had claimed him as her own when she thought he was a common man. Now she would receive the reward for her unselfish affection. Even old Benet's secret hostility toward André-Louis melted after this shocking revelation. He pinched his daughter's ear playfully.
Ah, I trust you to have seen through his disguise, my child.
She shrank back resentfully from his implication.
But I did not. I took him for who he seemed.
Her father winked at her solemnly and laughed.
To be sure you did. But your father was once a gentleman and knows gentlemanly ways. Like me, you detected something subtle in him. This made him different from the people misfortune has forced you to live with. You knew he never learned that haughty attitude and grand air of command in a dusty law office. His speech hardly sounded like a common bourgeois. His thoughts were far too complex. It was smart of you to make him yours. I will be very proud of you yet, Clymene.
She moved away without answering. Her father's oily manner offended her. Scaramouche was clearly a great gentleman. He might be eccentric, but he was highborn, and she would be his lady. Her father must learn to treat her differently. She looked shyly at her lover when he entered the dining room. It was a new kind of shyness. She noticed his proud posture for the first time. His habit of thrusting his chin forward caught her eye. She also noticed his graceful movements. He moved like someone who had studied with dancing and fencing masters in his youth. It almost hurt her when he dropped into a chair. He exchanged a joke with Harlequin in his usual equal manner. It offended her even more that Harlequin spoke to him with such inappropriate familiarity now that he knew the truth.
Do you know,
Clymene said,
that I am waiting for the explanation which I think you owe me?
They were alone together, still lingering at the table where André-Louis had arrived late. He was loading his pipe, a habit he had recently picked up since joining the Benet troupe. The others had gone out to take the air. Some, like Benet and Madame, had left because they felt it was best to leave the two of them to their inevitable explanations. André-Louis did not share that feeling. He lit his pipe and took a slow puff, and a frown settled on his forehead.
Explanation?
He asked after a moment, looking at her.
But for what? For the deception you have practiced on us and on me. I have practiced none.
He assured her.
You mean that you have simply kept quiet, and that silence is not deception. But it is deceitful to hide facts about yourself and your true social class from your future wife. You should not have pretended to be a simple country lawyer, which anyone could see you are not. It might have been very romantic, but will you explain? I see.
he said, taking another pull at his pipe.
But you are wrong, Clymene. I have not practiced any deception. If there are things about me that I haven't told you, it is because I did not think they were important. I have never deceived you by pretending to be someone I am not. I am exactly who I have represented myself to be.
This persistence began to annoy her. Her annoyance showed on her pretty face and colored her voice.
Ha! And what about that fine lady of the nobility with whom you are so intimate? The one who carried you off in her carriage with so little regard for me? What is she to you? She is a sort of sister,
He said.
a sort of sister.
She was indignant.
Harlequin predicted you would say that, but he was just amusing himself. It was not very funny. It is even less funny coming from you. I suppose this sort of sister has a name? Certainly she has a name. She is Mademoiselle Aline de Kercadia, the niece of Quentin de Kercadia, the Lord of Gavrillac. Oh, that is a very fine name for your sort of sister. What sort of sister is she, my friend?
For the first time since they met, he noticed a hint of vulgarity and bitterness in her manner, and he deplored it.
It would have been more accurate for me to say she is a sort of reputed left-handed cousin. A reputed left-handed cousin. And what kind of relationship is that? Truly, you dazzle me with your clarity. It needs to be explained. That is what I have been telling you, but you seem very reluctant to explain. Oh no, it is only because they are so unimportant. But you can be the judge. Her uncle, Monsieur de Kercadia, is my godfather, and as a result, she and I have been playmates since we were babies. People in Gavrillac widely believe that Monsieur de Kercadia is my real father. He has certainly taken care of me since I was very young. It is entirely thanks to him that I was educated at Louis le Grand. I owe him everything that I have, or rather, everything that I had. I have cut myself off from him of my own free will. Today I own nothing except what I can earn for myself in the theater or elsewhere.
She sat stunned and pale under that cruel blow to her swollen pride. If he had told her this yesterday, it would have made no impression on her at all. The events of today would have only made him look better in her eyes. But hearing it now, after her imagination had created such a magnificent background for him, this disclosure crushed and humiliated her. She had believed that discovering his splendid identity had made her the envy of the whole company, that marrying him would make her a great lady. Now, her prince in disguise was merely the outcast bastard of a country gentleman. She would be the laughingstock of her father's troop, and of everyone who had envied her romantic good fortune just moments ago.
You should have told me this before,
She said in a dull voice, trying to keep it steady.
Perhaps I should have, but does it really matter? Matter?
She held back her fury to ask another question.
You say that this Monsieur de Kercadia is popularly believed to be your father. What exactly do you mean? Just that. It is a belief that I do not share. Perhaps it is just an instinct. Furthermore, I once asked Monsieur de Kercadia directly, and he denied it. Given the circumstances, one might not attach too much importance to a denial. However, I have never known Monsieur de Kercadia to be anything other than a man of strict honor. I would hesitate to disbelieve him, especially when his statement matches my own instincts. He assured me that he did not know who my father was. And your mother, was she equally ignorant?
She sneered, but he didn't notice. Her back was to the light.
He would not reveal her name to me. He confessed that she was a dear friend of his.
She startled him with a short, unpleasant laugh.
A very dear friend, you can be sure of that, you simpleton. What name do you go by?
He restrained his own rising anger to answer her calmly.
Moreau. I am told it was given to me from the village in Brittany where I was born, but I have no real claim to it. In fact, I have no name at all except perhaps Scaramouche, a title I have earned. So you see, my dear, I have not practiced any deception. No, I see that now.
She gave a joyless laugh, then took a deep breath and stood up.
I am very tired,
she said. He was on his feet in an instant, full of concern, but she waved him away wearily.
I think I will rest until it is time to go to the theater.
She moved toward the door, dragging her feet slightly. He jumped to open it, and she walked out without looking at him. Her brief romantic dream was over. The glorious fantasy world she had built over the last hour lay shattered at her feet. She had imagined herself ruling over a magnificent destiny. Now those ruins were stumbling blocks that kept her from returning to her former contentment with Scaramouche just as he was. André-Louis sat in the window seat, smoking and looking idly across the river. He was intrigued and thoughtful. He had clearly shocked her, but the reason was not so obvious. Confessing that he was nameless shouldn't have particularly bothered a girl raised in Clymene's environment. Yet, it was completely obvious that his confession had upset her deeply. Half an hour later, Columbine returned and found him still brooding.
All alone, my prince.
She greeted him with a laugh, which suddenly shed light on his confusion. Clymene had been disappointed by the wild hopes that these actors had suddenly built up after he met Aline. Poor child. He smiled wryly at Columbine.
I am likely to be alone for quite some time,
He said.
Until everyone gets used to the fact that I am not a prince after all. Not a prince? Oh, but a duke then, or at least a marquis. Not even a knight unless it is a knight of fortune. I am just Scaramouche. All my castles are built in the air.
Disappointment clouded her lively, good-natured face.
And I had imagined you. I know.
He interrupted.
That is the problem.
He could measure the extent of that problem by Clymene's behavior that evening toward the fashionable gentlemen who gathered in the green room between acts. She usually received these men with a careful respect, but tonight she was recklessly loud, bold, and almost wild. He spoke to her gently about it as they walked home together, advising her to be more careful in the future.
We are not married yet.
She told him sharply.
Wait until then before you criticize my behavior. I trust there will be no reason to then.
He said.
You trust? Ah, yes, you are very trusting. Clymene, I have offended you. I am sorry. It is nothing.
She said.
You are who you are.
He was still not overly concerned. He saw the reason for her bad mood, and because he understood it, he forgave her. He also noticed that her father shared her bad mood, and this frankly amused him. After getting to know Monsieur Binet completely, André-Louis felt nothing but a tolerant contempt for him. As for the rest of the company, they were inclined to be very kind to Scaramouche. It was almost as if he had actually fallen from the high position their imaginations had given him. Or perhaps they were kind because they saw how his fall from that fictional status had affected Clymene. Leander alone was the exception. His usual gloom seemed to have finally vanished, and his eyes shone with malicious satisfaction whenever he looked at Scaramouche. He even continued to mockingly call him
My prince.
from time to time. The next day, André-Louis saw very little of Clymene. This was not unusual, as he was hard at work preparing for
Figaro Scaramouche,
which was set to be performed on Saturday. On top of his many theater duties, he also started spending an hour every morning at a fencing academy. He did this mainly to gain more grace and balance on stage, but also to fill a gap in his education. That morning, he found himself distracted by thoughts of both Clymene and Aline. Oddly enough, it was Aline who troubled him the most. He viewed Clymene's attitude as a passing phase that didn't need much attention. But the thought of Aline's behavior toward him kept bothering him. The thought of her possible engagement to the Marquis de la Tour d'Azur bothered him even more. This forcefully reminded him of the personal mission he had half forgotten. He had boasted that he would make the voice the Marquis had tried to silence ring throughout the entire country. And what had he actually done? He had stirred up the crowds in Rennes and Nantes, speaking just as poor Philippe might have. But then, when they started hunting for him, he had run away like a scared dog. He had hidden in the first safe place he could find, kept quiet, and focused on his own selfish goals. What a contrast between his bold promises and his actual actions. He felt a deep sense of self-contempt. While he wasted his time playing Scaramouche and dreaming of becoming a famous writer like Chenier or Mercier, the Marquis de la Tour d'Azur continued on his proud, unchallenged path, doing whatever he pleased. It was useless to tell himself that his actions were having an effect. Even though Monsieur Necker had granted the demands he voiced for the Third Estate, that wasn't his true goal. He wasn't trying to save humanity or reform French society. His only goal was to make sure the Marquis paid dearly for the brutal murder of Philippe de Vilmorin. It didn't help his self-respect to realize that his anger and his vow were only really reawakened because Aline might marry the Marquis. He was tempted to dismiss his own excuses, that there was nothing he could do, that showing his face would only get him arrested and hanged, as mere lies. It is impossible to read this part of his
Confessions
without feeling some pity for him. You can see how conflicted and emotional he was. If you put yourself in his shoes, you understand that he couldn't make any solid decisions yet. He decided to wait until he saw a clear path that would actually help him achieve his real goals. As it happened, the first person he saw when he stepped onto the stage that Thursday evening was Aline. The second was the Marquis de la Tour d'Azur. They were sitting in a box on the right, just above the stage. There were other people with them, including a thin, elegantly dressed older woman who André-Louis guessed was the Countess de Sautron. But at that moment, he only had eyes for those two who had been haunting his thoughts. Seeing either of them would have been unsettling enough, but seeing them together almost made him forget why he was on stage. He pulled himself together and began to perform. He played with incredible nerve that night, and he was never applauded more in his entire short but eventful career. That was the first shock of the evening. The next one came after the second act. When he walked into the green room, he found it more crowded than usual. At the far end, he saw the Marquis de la Tour d'Azur. The Marquis was leaning over Clymene, his eyes fixed on her beautiful face while he smiled and talked to her. He had her completely to himself, a privilege none of the other fashionable gentlemen had ever enjoyed. Those lesser men had all backed away from the Marquis, like jackals backing away from a lion. André-Louis stared for a moment, completely stunned. Once he recovered from his surprise, he began to study the Marquis critically. He noted the man's beauty, grace, and splendid clothing, his elegant manners, and his unshakable confidence. But most of all, he noticed the way the Marquis's dark eyes were devouring Clymene's lovely face, and his own lips tightened in anger. The Marquis never noticed him or his stare. Even if he had, he wouldn't have known who was looking at him from beneath Scaramouche's makeup. And even if he had known, he wouldn't have cared at all. André-Louis sat down away from the crowd, his mind in a state of chaos. Soon, a fussy young gentleman started talking to him, and he managed to reply as expected. Since Clymene was occupied and Columbine was surrounded by admirers, the other visitors had to settle for Madame Binet and the male actors. Monsieur Binet was actually the center of a cheerful group, laughing loudly at his own jokes. He seemed to have completely recovered from his bad mood. Scaramouche noticed how Binet kept glancing over at his daughter and her splendid new admirer. That night, André-Louis and Clymene had a fierce argument, mostly fueled by Clymene. When he once again urged her to be careful and warned her against encouraging a man like the Marquis, she became incredibly abusive. She shocked him with her vicious tone and her unexpectedly harsh insults. He tried to reason with her, and she finally laid out her terms.
If you only got engaged to me to stand in my way, the sooner we end this, the better. You don't love me then, Clymene? Love has nothing to do with it. I will not tolerate your crazy jealousy. A girl in the theater has to accept attention from everyone. I agree, and there is no harm in it, as long as she gives nothing in return.
She turned on him, her face pale and her eyes blazing.
Now, what exactly do you mean by that? My meaning is clear. A girl in your position can receive all the compliments offered to her, as long as she keeps a dignified distance. She must make it clear that she has no favors to give in return, other than a smile. If she is smart, she will make sure her admirers always approach her as a group. Never give any single one of them the privilege of approaching her alone. If she is smart, she will not encourage them or give them hopes that she cannot later deny. How dare you? I know the world, and I know the Marquis de la Tour d'Azur.
He answered.
He is a man with almost no humanity or kindness. He is a man who takes what he wants wherever he finds it, whether it is given willingly or not. He doesn't care about the misery he causes while satisfying his own desires. His only law is force. Think about it, Clymene, and ask yourself if I am wrong to warn you.
He left after saying that, feeling degraded by continuing the conversation. The days that followed were miserable for him, and for at least one other person. Leander was thrown into deep depression by the Marquis's constant attention to Clymene. The Marquis attended every performance. A box was always reserved for him, and he always came either alone or with his cousin, the Chevalier de Chamberlain. Early on Tuesday morning of the following week, André-Louis went out for a walk alone. He was in a bad mood, overwhelmed by a sense of humiliation, and he hoped the walk would clear his head. As he turned the corner of the Place du Buffet, he ran into a slim, pale man dressed neatly in black, wearing a tie wig under a round hat. The man stepped back when he saw him, raised a spyglass to his eye, and called out in amazement.
Moreau, where the devil have you been hiding all these months?
It was Le Chapelier, the lawyer and leader of the literary chamber of Rennes.
Behind the skirts of the theater.
Scaramouche replied.
I don't understand. I didn't intend for you to. How are you, Isaac? And how is the world, which seems to have been standing still lately? Standing still?
Le Chapelier laughed.
Where have you been? Standing still.
He pointed across the square to a cafe near the dark prison.
Let's go get a drink. You are exactly the man we need. The man we have been looking everywhere for. Here you drop from the sky right into my path.
They crossed the square and went into the cafe.
So you think the world has been standing still? Good God! I suppose you haven't heard the royal order calling the States General, or the terms of it, that we are getting exactly what we demanded, what you demanded for us here in Nantes. You haven't heard that the order has been given for the primary elections to choose the electors. You haven't heard about the new riots in Rennes last month. The order was that all three estates should sit together at the assemblies, but the nobles in Rennes refused. They actually took up arms, 600 of them with their servants, led by your old friend, the Marquis de la Tour d'Azur. They wanted to slash the members of the Third Estate to ribbons to stop our insolence.
He gave a delicate laugh.
But, by God, we showed them that we could fight back too. It was exactly what you suggested here in Nantes last November. We fought them in a pitched battle in the streets, led by your namesake Moreau, the provost. We beat them so badly they were glad to hide in the Cordelier convent. That was the end of their resistance to the king's authority and the people's will.
He talked rapidly, detailing everything that had happened, and finally got to the reason he had been searching for André-Louis so desperately. Nantes was sending 50 delegates to the assembly in Rennes, which would select the deputies for the Third Estate and write up their list of grievances. Rennes was sending just as many, while smaller villages like Gavrillac were sending 2 delegates for every 200 households. All 3 of these places had demanded that André-Louis Moreau be one of their delegates. Gavrillac wanted him because he was from there, and they knew what he had sacrificed for the people's cause. Rennes wanted him because they had heard his inspiring speech the day the students were shot. And Nantes, who didn't know his real identity, asked for him as the speaker who had addressed them as
Omnes Omnibus,
and who had written the petition that heavily influenced Monsieur Necker's new rules. Because they couldn't find him, the delegations had been formed without him. But a few spots had opened up in the Nantes representation, and Le Chapelier had come to Nantes specifically to fill those spots. André-Louis firmly shook his head in response to Le Chapelier's offer.
You refuse?
The other man cried.
Are you crazy? Refuse. When so many people are asking for you, do you realize it is very likely you will be elected as a deputy, sent to the States General at Versailles to represent us and help save France?
But André-Louis was not interested in saving France. Right now, he was focused on saving 2 women, whom he loved in very different ways, from a man he had sworn to destroy. He stood firm in his refusal until Le Chapelier sadly gave up trying to persuade him.
It is strange
André-Louis said.
that I have been so distracted by silly things that I never noticed Nantes becoming so politically active. Active, my friend, it is a boiling pot of political emotion. It only stays quiet on the surface because people think everything is going well. If they thought otherwise, it would boil over immediately. Is that so?
Scaramouche said thoughtfully.
That information might be useful.
Then he changed the subject.
Did you know that La Tour d'Azur is here? In Nantes, he is brave if he shows his face. These people in Nantes are not docile, and they know his history and his part in the riots in Rennes. I am surprised they haven't stoned him yet, but they will sooner or later. Someone just needs to suggest it. That is very likely,
André-Louis said with a smile.
He doesn't show himself much, at least not in the streets. So he doesn't have the courage you think he has, or any courage at all, as I told him once. He only has arrogance.
As they parted, Le Chapelier urged him once more to think about the offer.
Send me word if you change your mind. I am staying at the Surf Inn, and I will be here until the day after tomorrow. If you have any ambition, this is your moment. I suppose I have no ambition,
André-Louis said, and walked away. That night at the theater, he felt a mischievous urge to test what Le Chapelier had told him about the public's mood. They were performing
The Terrible Captain.
In the final act, Scaramouche exposes the empty cowardice of the bullying braggart, Captain Rodomont. After the crowd laughed at the captain's exposure, Scaramouche always dismissed him with a different insulting phrase every night. This time, he chose a political insult.
And so, you pathetic coward, your emptiness is exposed. People have been afraid of you because of your height, your big sword, and the arrogant way you wear your hat. They believed you were as terrible and formidable as you try to appear. But at the first sign of real courage, you crumble, you tremble, you whine pitifully, and your great sword stays in your scabbard. You remind me of the privileged orders when they are confronted by the Third Estate.
It was a bold move, and he was ready for anything, a laugh, applause, anger, or all three. But he was not prepared for what actually happened. The audience in the pit and the amphitheater erupted so suddenly and spontaneously that it almost scared him, like a boy who accidentally sets a dry haystack on fire. It was a hurricane of furious applause. Men jumped to their feet, stood on the benches, waved their hats, and deafened him with their roaring cheers. The applause rolled on, and didn't stop until the curtain fell. Scaramouche stood there, smiling thoughtfully with tight lips. At the last second, he had seen the Marquis de la Tour d'Azur lean far out of the shadows of his box. His face was frozen in anger, and his eyes were blazing.
My God!
Laughed Rodomont, recovering from his real shock.
You really know how to hit them right where they want it, Scaramouche.
Scaramouche looked up at him and smiled.
Can be useful sometimes,
he said, and went to his dressing room to change. But he was in for a scolding. He was delayed at the theater dealing with the scenery for the new play they were putting on the next day. By the time he was finished, the rest of the company was long gone. He called a sedan chair and rode back to the inn in solitary comfort, one of the minor luxuries he could afford now. When he walked into the common room upstairs, he found Monsieur Binet talking loudly and angrily. He had heard Binet's voice while he was still on the stairs. As he entered, Binet stopped mid-sentence and spun around to face him.
You are finally here.
It was such a strange greeting that André-Louis just looked mildly surprised.
I am waiting for your explanation for the disgraceful scene you caused tonight. Disgraceful? Is it disgraceful that the audience applauded me? The audience? You mean the mob? Do you want to lose the patronage of all the gentlefolk by making vulgar appeals to the low passions of the mob?
André-Louis stepped past Monsieur Binet and walked toward the table. He shrugged contemptuously. The man disgusted him.
You are exaggerating wildly, as usual. I am not exaggerating, and I am the master in my own theater. This is the Binet troupe, and it will be run the Binet way. Who are these gentlefolk whose lost patronage will be so deeply felt at the Feydeau Theater?
André-Louis asked.
Are you implying there are none? You are very wrong. After the play tonight, the Marquis de la Tour d'Azur came to me and spoke very harshly about your scandalous outburst. I was forced to apologize and... Then you are a fool,
André-Louis said.
a man with any self-respect would have thrown that gentleman out.
Monsieur Benet's face began to turn purple.
You call yourself the head of the Benet troupe. You boast that you are the master in your own theater. Yet you stand there like a servant, taking orders from the first arrogant fellow who comes into your green room and tells you he doesn't like a line spoken by one of your actors. I repeat, if you truly respected yourself, you would have thrown him out.
Several members of the company murmured in agreement. They had heard the Marquis's arrogant tone and resented the insult to the whole troupe.
And I will add,
André-Louis continued,
that a man with self-respect, for entirely different reasons, would have been glad to use this excuse to show the Marquis the door. What do you mean by that?
The question sounded like a rumble of thunder. André-Louis looked around the company gathered at the supper table.
Where is climbing?
He asked sharply. Leander jumped up to answer him. He was pale, tense, and shaking with excitement.
She left the theater in the Marquis de la Tour d'Azur's carriage right after the performance. We heard him offer to drive her back to this inn.
André-Louis glanced at the clock over the fireplace. He seemed unnaturally calm.
That was over an hour ago, and she hasn't arrived yet?
His eyes searched for Monsieur Benet's, but Benet avoided his gaze. Leander answered him again.
Not yet.
André-Louis sat down and poured himself some wine. A heavy silence fell over the room. Leander watched him expectantly, and Columbine looked at him with pity. Even Monsieur Benet seemed to be waiting for Scaramouche to react, but Scaramouche disappointed him.
Did you leave me anything to eat?
He asked. Plates were pushed toward him. He calmly served himself food and ate in silence, seemingly with a good appetite. Monsieur Benet sat down, poured some wine, and drank. After a while, he tried to start conversations with a few people, but they answered him briefly, in single words. Monsieur Benet was clearly not popular with his troupe tonight. Finally, they heard the sound of wheels below and the clatter of horses stopping. Then they heard voices and Clymene's high, trilling laugh floating up the stairs. André-Louis kept eating without a care.
What an actor!
Harlequin whispered to Polichinelle, who nodded gloomily. She walked in like a leading lady taking the stage. Her head was high, her chin pushed forward, and her eyes danced with laughter. She looked triumphant and arrogant. Her cheeks were flushed, and her thick brown hair was slightly messy. In her left hand, she carried a huge bouquet of white camellias. On her middle finger, a large, brilliant diamond immediately caught everyone's attention. Her father jumped up to meet her, showing an unusual amount of fatherly affection.
At last, my child.
He led her to the table. She sank into a chair, looking a bit tired and weak. The smile never left her face, not even when she glanced across at Scaramouche. Only Leander, who was watching her closely with a hungry, angry stare, noticed a flash of fear in her hazel eyes before she fluttered her eyelids. André-Louis, however, just kept eating stolidly, not even looking in her direction. Gradually, the rest of the company realized that a scene was definitely brewing, but it wouldn't happen as long as they were there. Finally, Polichinelle gave the signal by getting up and leaving. Within 2 minutes, everyone else had left the room, leaving only Monsieur Benet, his daughter, and André-Louis. And then, at last, André-Louis put down his knife and fork, took a drink of Burgundy, leaned back in his chair to look at Clymene.
I hope you had a pleasant ride, mademoiselle,
He said.
Very pleasant, monsieur.
She tried to match his calm tone, but didn't quite succeed.
And quite profitable too, judging by that jewel. It must be worth at least 200 louis, which is a huge sum even for a wealthy nobleman like the Marquis. Would it be inappropriate for someone who once considered becoming your husband to ask what you gave him in return?
Monsieur Benet let out a gross laugh, a mix of cynicism and contempt.
I gave him nothing.
Clymene said indignantly.
Ah, then the jewel is a sort of payment in advance. My God, man, have you no decency?
Monsieur Binet protested.
Decency?
André-Louis's smoldering eyes turned to Monsieur Binet, blasting him with such intense contempt that the old scoundrel shifted uncomfortably in his chair.
Did you mention decency, Binet? You are almost making me lose my temper, which is something I hate doing.
Slowly, he looked back at Clymene, who was resting her elbows on the table and her chin in her hands, staring at him with a mix of scorn and defiance.
Mademoiselle,
He said slowly,
I am asking you purely for your own good to think about where you are going with this. I am perfectly capable of thinking for myself and deciding without your advice, monsieur. And there's your answer.
chuckled Binet.
I hope you like it.
André-Louis had grown a little pale. There was disbelief in his large, dark eyes as he kept looking steadily at her. He completely ignored Monsieur Binet.
Surely, mademoiselle, you cannot mean that you willingly, with your eyes wide open, would trade an honorable marriage for whatever men like the Marquis de la Tour d'Azyr have planned for you.
Monsieur Binet threw his hands up and turned to his daughter.
Listen to him, the self-righteous prude. Maybe now you'll believe that marrying him would ruin you. He would always be there as the annoying husband, ruining every chance you get, my girl.
She tossed her beautiful head, agreeing with her father.
I am starting to find his silly jealousy very tiring.
She confessed.
As a husband, I am afraid he would be impossible.
André-Louis felt a tightness in his chest. But, always the actor, he hid his feelings completely. He gave a sharp, unpleasant laugh and stood up.
I respect your choice, mademoiselle. I only pray that you do not regret it. Regret it?
Cried Monsieur Binet. He was laughing, relieved to finally be rid of this suitor. He had never approved of André-Louis, except for those few hours when he thought he was an eccentric nobleman.
What is there to regret? That she accepted the protection of a powerful, wealthy nobleman who gives her a trinket worth more than an actress at the Comédie Française earns in a whole year?
He stood up and walked toward André-Louis, adopting a more friendly tone.
Come now, my friend. Let's not hold any grudges. You wouldn't want to stand in the girl's way, would you? You can't really blame her for making this choice. Have you thought about what this means for her? Under the protection of a gentleman like him, there are no heights she cannot reach. Don't you see how incredibly lucky this is? If you truly care about her, especially with your jealous nature, surely you wouldn't want it any other way?
André-Louis looked at him in silence for a long time. Then he laughed again.
Oh, you are unbelievable,
He said.
You aren't even real.
He turned around and walked toward the door. His actions, and especially the contempt in his look, laugh, and words, made Monsieur Binet furious and destroyed his friendly mood.
Unbelievable, are we?
He shouted, turning to watch Scaramouche leave, his small eyes filled with pure evil.
It's unbelievable that we would choose the powerful protection of this great nobleman over marrying a penniless, nameless bastard? Oh yes, we are very unbelievable.
André-Louis turned around with his hand on the doorknob.
No,
He said,
I was wrong. You are not unbelievable. You are just vile. Both of you.
and with that, he walked out.